Welcome back to the show. In today's episode of Unhooked, I had the pleasure of being interviewed on the What the Fuck Do I Do Now podcast with Mandy Pitera. Mandy is a dear friend and has graciously allowed me to share this interview here on Unhooked. So please go and support Mandy by checking out her podcast, What the Fuck Do I Do Now? In this conversation, we dive deep into my own personal journey with porn addiction, beginning from my early childhood encounters with porn, through my struggles in my college years, and finally to the transformative healing journey that I went on to break free. We discussed the pervasive impacts of porn addiction on relationships, mental clarity, and overall well-being. We also tackle some of the common misconceptions on porn, shedding light on how it affects both individuals and their partners. So, without further ado, please join me and Mandy as we explore the realities of overcoming addiction and the tools necessary for lasting change.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Lip, and with over 12 years of meditation experience as a mindfulness trainer and coach for high performers, I've become obsessed with helping people break free from compulsive, unhealthy behaviors and addictions and step into a life of true freedom so that they can finally become their best selves and cultivate deeper and lasting fulfillment. I've created Unhooked, the Breaking Porn Addiction podcast, to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to master your mind and optimize your life. This is Unhooked.
All right, welcome back to another episode of What the Fuck Do I Do Now? I'm super excited to invite our next guest, Jeremy. I want to give a little backstory into how I know Jeremy, because I think this is a very meaningful guest for me to have on here. So when I was in Bali, that's right around the time, a few months after the betrayal trauma, and I was getting interested in learning more about porn addiction. And I just started praying, speaking to God, the universe, however you want to call it. And one day I was just like, give me a sign if this is something I should start to speak up about. And the next day I start listening to a podcast about porn addiction. And at the end of the podcast episode, the man, who is Jeremy, goes, "With love from Bali." And I was like, what? He's in Bali? I'm in Bali right now. This is sweet. So I stalked his Instagram, found out what area he was living in Bali. And it was like an hour drive away from me. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to reach out to him, see if he'll talk to me, because I have so many questions as I'm trying to understand porn addiction. And I reached out to him and he was so kind. He was like, yeah, absolutely, we can meet. And so we met in Bali and I just asked him questions about porn addiction. And looking back at the whole healing journey, I do feel like that was a pivotal moment in my healing journey, just being able to talk to someone so openly about addiction. And he coaches and helps other people recover from porn addiction and overcome porn addiction. So it was great having that insight. And then fast forward like a few months later, he did a podcast with me on his podcast, podcast interview. And then after that, I was like, I want to start a podcast. And so then I started a podcast. So Jeremy is a huge reason why my podcast even exists today. So Jeremy, thank you so much. You have made such an impactful, change in my life. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It was a joy to meet up in Bali, and I've loved seeing what you're doing with the What the Fuck Do I Do Now podcast. It's been cool to watch it grow and flourish. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I don't know if I would have gotten here without your help, so thank you.
Yeah.
And so we can go ahead and just set the stage. I think it'd be great just to give listeners a little background description of what got you into this journey, a little bit about your past struggle with pornography consumption, and how it has led you to now create this amazing coaching business helping others navigate it.
Yeah. So my story of how it all began really starts with my own addiction to porn. It's something that started, I think I must have been, 6 or 7 years old when I started looking at things and engaging in self-pleasure. It started with Victoria's Secret's catalogs that were coming in the mail and like the Macy's catalog. And over time, it developed into porn when I got to college. And it was something around my college years when I noticed I had an issue with it. I noticed the ways it was starting to affect my life, the ways it was impacting my relationships, my intimacy, my focus and concentration, my mental health in so many ways. And we could talk about this later, but there's 1,000 different small ways that it can impact your life. And I started to notice that in my life and realized I had an issue and had to find a way out. And so that led me on a long journey. It ended up sending me to India and getting me into Buddhist philosophy and meditation. And that really changed my life, like a full 180-degree change. And so that was, where I got out of porn. And that was at this point, maybe 15 years ago. And I got so into meditation in the process and Buddhist philosophy that ended up becoming something I was very passionate about. I started teaching meditation and made a career out of that and did that for about 10 years. And then about 10 years into my journey of teaching meditation and starting to work with people one-on-one, I realized that there was still this huge issue of so many other men struggling with porn addiction and silence. And so I kind of went back to my origins and started helping men with this problem. And that was about 5 or 6 years ago. And ever since then, it's been my main thing, my main purpose in life is to shed light on this problem because it's a huge problem. It's not going away. It's just getting bigger. And that's what I do with my time.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful, and cheers to you. I just love hearing that story. It's amazing. And I think you bring such a important topic or important point saying how porn impacts your lives in many ways. And I think there is such a misinformation out where people, whenever I post on social media, I'll get at least a few people being like, oh, porn is just porn. Porn is harmless. It's stop being insecure, stop being dramatic. But could you talk more about how porn was impacting your life and or how you see it how it's impacting your clients' lives as well?
Yeah. And it's going to be different for everyone. So there's 1,000 different ways that it can impact your life. And each person will have a different set of those 1,000 different ways. Some of the ways for me personally that I was noticing and that was the real motivation for me to quit was the ways that lust was taking control of my life. It wasn't that I wasn't sitting in some dark alleyway, shooting up heroin and, all this like really dark stuff. But it was just that my brain had become so hardwired for lust and for seeking sexual pleasure that it really took control over my life. And it was hard for me to go places without, scanning the room and seeing who was attractive there. And one of the other ways that kind of seeped into my life was in terms of my intimate relationships with women. One of the things that engaging in heavy porn use does is it gets you addicted to novelty. Because every time you log on to Pornhub or whatever it is that you're using to search, and you're scanning through, hundreds of thumbnails or thousands of different videos. And every time you see a new video or a new face, you get this little dopamine hit. And so what that's training your brain to do is you're getting addicted to seeing something new, to wanting something novel or something fresh, something exciting. And you're training your brain that your sexual satisfaction comes from a fresh face or a fresh video or a new thing. And so I started to notice that in my relationships, the ways that I was constantly just searching for something new, wanting something different. So I would be with someone and I might have really wanted to be with that person. Maybe, for weeks or months, I was, trying to get with some person and start a relationship. And then I would get with them. And maybe after a week or 2 weeks, I would get bored and I would make up some excuse. There's something not quite right, or they're not quite perfect. And then I would try to look for something else. And the really painful thing is I could see where that was heading if I didn't make a change, if I didn't do something about it, where that was leading me in the future. I didn't want to be some 50 or 60-year-old man who was just constantly sleeping around and looking for new people to sleep with. And so that was one of the ways that it was impacting me. there's also all the other little ways, the ways that it affects your mental clarity, gives you brain fog, hard to focus. It's just such a dopaminergic substance that it screws with your dopamine system. And that I was definitely noticing, it's harder and harder to focus, harder and harder to have a clear head. But yeah, just the ways that it can contribute to objectification and over reliance on stimulation. There's a million different ways. So that was my journey personally. There's also, for many men, things like erectile dysfunction and issues with intimacy in bed. It can also lead to escalation in terms of content. Many men notice that it will escalate what they're interested in because they need bigger and bigger, more exciting things to get aroused. And so they'll escalate into things that are maybe outside of their values, outside of being in integrity. It can also escalate beyond porn into things like infidelity, to cheating, to, happy ending massages or prostitution. There's a lot of ways that it can escalate outside of porn as well.
Yeah. And I think, you made so many good points, but two that really stuck out for me that I'd love to talk about more is the novelty. Just knowing that this podcast is mostly women who are listening and are betrayed partners, and they think like, oh, the addiction was because they weren't good enough, et cetera,
Yeah.
which isn't true. But also the escalation. And I have a lot of girls message me on TikTok and Instagram being like, oh, my boyfriend watches porn. Should I be worried? I don't like it. And that's not a situation I can give advice. And like every person is different. But I do think it's really important to educate people more on the topic of escalation. And like, for example, with my ex, I know he was a porn addict, which escalated into a sex addiction and acting out in real life. And a big reason previously, I never really second guessed porn because I was like, oh, it's just a girl on the screen. What's the big deal? But now knowing and having met so many other betrayed partners where the man did eventually act out in real life, would you say that's a common theme among either the people you work with or just conversations you have with people about porn?
It's a good question. I would say it's not necessarily, like, I wouldn't want to give the impression that it's an inevitability. And I should also say, I don't hold the view that everyone who watches porn is addicted to porn. I do think
absolutely
there are people out there who, I think it's a smaller and smaller subset, but I think there are people out there who it's not really having a major impact on their life. Maybe they watch it once a month and their partner knows about it and it doesn't lead to escalation. And it's, there are subsets of people where it's not going to have this crazy impact. I think we could talk about what those scenarios would be and how do you know if it's healthy. I think one of the biggest ones is as long as you're not hiding it from your partner. But the escalation, it's, for some people, it'll escalate into things outside of porn. For some people, it will just escalate in terms of the content of the porn that they're watching, more and more extreme types of things that they're watching. And some people, it won't escalate. And if it doesn't escalate, that's a pretty good sign that you might have a semi-healthy relationship with it. And I want to caveat that with semi-healthy. Like, I view porn in the similar way that I might view junk food. I think it's a different thing and there are worse consequences. But junk food, for example, I don't think like eating a Krispy Kreme donut, I don't think is ever going to really benefit your life in terms of like the health benefits. But I also don't think that like if you have a Krispy Kreme donut once a month, that like your life is going to be over and it's going to ruin your life. And so I think in a similar way, like porn, I think for some people, it might not ruin their life, but I think it's not necessarily something that I would ever call, oh, this is a healthy thing for you to engage in.
Yeah. And I'm just out of general curiosity, I don't know, how would you know if you have a semi-healthy relationship or healthy or unhealthy? Like what, as the consumer, how can you, keep track of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way that I approach it and the way that many of my clients approach it is that it's just better to not even try to. It's such a hard thing to have a healthy relationship with that if you have any signs of kind of problematic use, If you're hiding it at all, if you are looking at stuff that you just don't feel quite right about, like, it's kind of out of integrity, it's better to not even try to have a quote unquote healthy relationship with it. I would say if you want to try to have a healthy relationship with it, some signs would be, one is being fully transparent with your partner. And if you don't have a partner, with any, potential partners that you have, but if there's any kind of hiding behavior where you are hiding your use of it, then it's a pretty big flag that there's some unhealthy stuff going on, that it's maybe more of a compulsive or addictive relationship with it. The other thing is how you watch. If you open up a tab and you find the first video you see, and you watch it for 20 minutes and you're not kind of like looking for more and more videos, that's another good sign. If it's just like, okay, I'll just watch this video, and you watch it from start to finish, and that's all you need, it's maybe 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. Because what we see with people with addiction is often, you have 10 tabs open, you're scrolling through the video to find your favorite position or your favorite scene. And that's an indication of maybe an unhealthy relationship with it. So yeah, it's hard to have a healthy relationship with it, but I won't argue with anyone. If anyone says it's fine for me and my partner and it doesn't impact our life, I would challenge them to say, like, okay, does your partner know? Because it's really funny. I do get some guys who say, like, yeah, it's not a big deal. And I say, does your partner know about it? And then they'll pause and they'll say, I think, it's like they've never had a conversation with their partner about it. And so I'm like, listen, dude, if your partner doesn't know about it, like, maybe you think it's fine, but it might be that your partner really is not okay with you doing it. And so you can say it's healthy, but if you're lying about it and hiding it from your partner, you got to really check in with yourself and say, is this really healthy?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And so I also receive a lot of messages from girls who say, oh, I told my partner I don't want him watching porn, and I caught him lying about it. And that sucks, of course. But do you have any advice on, I guess, if there's anything differently a girl could do in this situation, or if she's coming across like a repetitive issue of, oh, I talked to my boyfriend about it, he says he'll stop, then I catch him lying. Like, what would you recommend as a next step?
If a partner is repeatedly, like, if you've gotten to, so the first stage, even before that, is having the conversation, right? And that's a huge step that a lot of people haven't had yet. They haven't sat down and had an honest conversation and saying, hey, let's talk about porn. Are you using it? And I want to know. And for that, I would really recommend, as best as you can, if you can make it a safe conversation, and to say, hey, I'm not here to judge, and I really just want to know the truth. I'm not going to get, or, I'll try to moderate my anger, to try to make it a safe place where your partner feels that they can be honest and truthful. That's the important first step, because we haven't talked about this yet, but there's a huge amount of shame for men with this issue. Men get very defensive. They get very triggered. They get, because it's just a very shameful, sensitive topic for many men. And so as a partner, as best you can, like, making it a safe space to have that conversation and say, I really just want to know, is this something you do? How often do you do it? That's the first step. If it turns out they lie and say, no, I don't watch porn, but you're catching them watching porn. And if that's a repeated behavior, at some point you have to put down a boundary. You might have to leave. If it's something that's serious enough for you that you can't handle that lying, then, I don't know how I could be in a relationship with someone who's lying to my face repeatedly, right? It's harder if you can't catch them. Like, if you just kind of have this feeling, but you're not really sure, that's a harder situation. Like, if they say they're not watching porn and you don't have any actual evidence, you just feel like something's up. It's hard to say, because it could be that it's just a feeling you're having and it's not actually true. But if you know that they're watching porn and they're lying about it, you just gotta, I'm not here to give relationship advice and say, you have to leave this person. But I would say that, like, you're in within your right to say like, this is not okay. Like you're lying to my face about this thing. This keeps happening. You say you're going to quit. And this is the thing. If a guy says he's quit and you keep catching him and he says he's trying, you got to ask him like, what is he actually trying? Is he just trying harder, or is he actually getting professional support? Like, is he actually getting help with this? Is he joining a men's group? Is he joining an online program? Is he doing shadow work and going to therapy? Like, is he actually working on the issues of why he has this addiction, this unwanted porn use in the first place? Because if he just says, oh, I'm trying, but he's not actually doing anything except for trying harder, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I never want to give relationship advice saying, oh, like just leave, because every relationship is different. Every man is different. But I do think it would just be really validating for a woman to hear from a man, you, say like, you have every right to leave if someone is lying to you. Because I think porn has become so normalized in our society, obviously, and some women just don't, like, they just feel like, oh, if they're going to care about porn, then that makes them insecure or jealous or high maintenance, and that's something that they don't have a right to care about. So I think it's really powerful hearing from you say, yeah, you're allowed to leave if he's lying. And again, knowing that you're not giving relationship advice, but it's just another tier of validation, which is nice when you're stuck in that situation because you have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
Like I'm at wit's end. I don't know.
Yeah. Especially if it's something that's important to you. Like I do know women who genuinely don't care if their partner watches porn. And if you and your partner have a really healthy, vibrant sex life, like if the intimacy is going well and they're not lying about their porn use, they're kind of, yeah, I watched some porn last night. If you're okay with it, then that's a totally different story. But, there's a million different reasons why you might not be okay with it. And that's 100% okay.
Mm-hmm. Every person's different. Everyone has their own preferences.
Yeah.
And I want to tie back to what you were saying earlier about the novelty, because I think that's something that really helped me overcome the self-limiting belief after finding out about the porn addiction, where I very much so believe like, oh, it was because my body wasn't good enough, because I wasn't attractive enough, because I wasn't as sexy enough, because I wasn't doing enough in bed, because maybe just like anything you could think of, I'm like, oh, it's my fault. And for any women who are listening and are having those thoughts right now, is there anything you could share about going back to the novelty and how that's not the case?
Yeah. There's this common thing for women of men who are struggling with porn addiction, that there is this feeling of, oh, it must be me, like maybe I'm not attractive enough or I'm not doing enough. And it's so far from the truth. One component of that is the novelty thing, which is, again, you could be the most attractive, most beautiful person. You could be a 10 out of 10 in your partner's eyes. And it's just not even about that. It's just that, his brain is hooked on, I need something novel. I need something new. I need something fresh. This, remember when Tiger Woods got caught cheating? Like his wife at the time was a model, like an actual model, right? So it's not like she wasn't attractive. It's like he was sleeping around because he had this addiction to, I need something else. I need something more, right? Like he was married to an actual model. And so like, if you ever sit and think like, oh, it must be me, it's like, I don't know, like even if I'm a model, like this will still happen because it's his brain that's messed up. It's not my body that's messed up. Right. So the other thing to remember about this is like, unless you got with your partner when you guys were both 6 years old, chances are his addiction like predates you. Right. Unless you guys, are in some weird cult and like got married when you're 6, chances are he started having a relationship with self-pleasure and pleasing himself and masturbation, and kind of a compulsive relationship with masturbation and self-pleasure way before he met you. And so just to remember that like this predates you by a long shot. And it's something that has been in his life for most men, it starts when you're, 6 to 12 years old, when you start noticing, oh, I can touch myself and that brings pleasure. And you start, engaging. For me, it was like Macy's catalogs and Victoria's Secrets, like comic books, where I was like, oh, I see this picture and it lights up something within me that feels good. And I get this sense of power and control and all that. And so it's definitely not about you. It's like a way ages old habit for many men.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that too, because I don't even know how I'm going to form this next question, so I'm just going to go with it and see where it goes. But the more I speak on mainly TikTok about my ex-partner's porn addiction, the amount of comments I get from, to be fair, they're like troll fake accounts, like it's not real person, but the amount of comments I get of men saying, oh, it's because you didn't put out enough. Like, oh, it's because you were denying him in bed. Like, oh, it's because you weren't good enough. And I'm just like, at what point does it stop becoming the partner's fault? Like, fault in air quotes, because it's not. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but it's just nice to hear a man say, like, no, it's actually not the partner's fault. Like, and I think it totally does date back to they've had this self-pleasure practice, routine, habit, anything you want to call it, way before the relationship even started. So how is it all now of a sudden the partner's fault?
Yeah. And it's very rarely is it even about sex. I mean, a lot of men's porn addiction doesn't even have to do with their sexuality. It's a coping mechanism. It's an escape mechanism. It's a way to deal with pain. It's a sedative in many regards. It's a numbing agent that might be about their work. It might be about their sense of insecurity. It might be about something in the relationship. It doesn't mean that it condones their behavior, gives them a right to, but it might be that there is something in the relationship that they're unsatisfied with and they're reaching out to this. So I don't want to say that it's like that you have zero, there might be something in the relationship where it's like, okay, maybe we need to look at this, but it's also the 1,000 other things in their life that they're trying to cope with. And, it's not even about sex. And, those comments, they're frustrating and hilarious at the same time. It just shows how much ignorance and misogyny there is. Yeah. It's just because I get these comments too, from these people, and the amount of just lunacy from some of these comments. People are just so have their head in the sand, and it's wild to see what's out there.
Yeah. It's shocking, honestly. I remember this was probably like a week ago. I had a TikTok video that did like kind of well. And every time I was checking it, the amount of anxiety I got was insane. Like I literally had to lay down on my bathroom ground to like literally ground, because it was so many men just like going at me. And I was like, what? Like, I don't know. It just surprised me. And again, I know this isn't all men. I'm not saying that at all. This is just a percentage of men, and like it's troll accounts. But yeah, it's really eye-opening and also really heartbreaking to see that a lot of people aren't aware of how porn may be impacting them, or it's not. But yeah, it's just heartbreaking to see that as a society. It makes me really worried for society.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's quite sad.
You mentioned shame earlier, and I think that's a really important thing we should talk about. So do you dive in a little bit more on just how the shame that men have associated with it and how it's a little bit taboo and all of that?
Yeah. I mean, shame is one of the biggest drivers of addiction. It's one of the things that keeps us locked in addiction when we're ashamed of our habits or our behaviors or who we are. We think that we're broken in some way. And that keeps us, one of the main ways that it contributes to addiction is it keeps us isolated. When we feel ashamed of something about ourselves, we don't want other people to see that. And so we hide, we run away, we isolate. And it's a downward spiral. It's really sad because one of the most powerful ways to get out of addiction is to let yourself be seen by other people, to be seen by other men who know what this is and who aren't judging you or demonizing you. Because one of the other things that I noticed for myself, and many men notice this too, is in some ways you feel like a monster. This shame makes you feel so dirty or so broken. Like, oh my God, I'm so messed up. I'm such a pervert. And it really, it makes you want to act out even more because you want to escape that feeling. And we haven't even gotten into this yet, but like what addiction is, it's an attempt to escape pain. It's running away from pain, any kind of unpleasant emotion, sadness, anxiety, stress, insecurity, shame, even physical pain. That's what addiction is when we're trying to escape pain and numb ourselves. And so shame is a huge source of pain. And so when we feel that, of course, we want to escape it. So we reach to our addiction, which is often porn or junk food or video games or whatever it is for men. So shame is a huge component, and it's one of the first things you have to do if you want to recover is to let go of shame.
And how does one let go of shame?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me and for many of the men that I work with, being in community where you can talk about, for me, it took me a million years to be able to talk about porn. Now it's crazy. Like the fact that yeah. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
The fact that I talk about it like publicly on all my social media, and this is like my thing that I do now, it's wild to me because I was so ashamed of it for decades,
Wow.
Like I didn't want anybody to even know that I looked at porn. When I was in college and looking at porn every night, I was terrified that somebody would even know that I watched porn. There's kind of two kinds of guys that like are addicted. Half the guys that are addicted are really ashamed of it and very secretive about it. The other half that are addicted are like the misogynistic troll bunch, like, kind of, hey, I saw this, hot video, gangbang, whatever. And it's like, there's like two types of guys, like ones that have zero shame. I wouldn't even say zero shame, but it's like, there's like zero filter and they just, complete misogynistic kind of culture. And then there's the other ones who are just like, they might even joke about it, but in private, they feel bad about it, but there's that shame associated. And for me, I was so ashamed of it. I couldn't talk about it. If anybody knew, I would feel, just horrible. And then even when I broke free from porn, so I broke free when I was like 20, 24, 25. And even after I broke free from it, it took me like another 5 or 6 years before I could really even talk about it with a single person. Like to even mention, hey, actually, what got me, because this was a big part of my journey, what got me into meditation and mindfulness and Buddhism, so much so that I ended up leaving my academic career. I was a PhD student in genetics at Duke. I left my whole academic career and started teaching meditation. And what got me into meditation was my porn addiction, was realizing that it was the source of a lot of my suffering. But it took me 5 years before I could even open up to a single person. And I remember the moment. It was another graduate student at Duke, and we were like having coffee, and he was another Buddhist practitioner, meditator. And I forget how it came up, but at some point I had the courage and say like, yeah, what got me into this was, realizing that I was addicted to porn and creating a lot of my own suffering. And I remember it was so healing. He, just turned to me and said like, yeah, I struggle with that too. And that moment was like a huge weight off my shoulders to realize that I could share something that I was ashamed of, and it would be held in a safe way, like in a non-judgmental way. That is one of the biggest things you can do to heal shame.
Wow. I'm so glad you had such a healing experience sharing about that the first time. And I'm really glad it like didn't go sideways, because that would be quite literally like living hell. And I'm curious, so I feel like the general understanding or belief of society is that all men watch porn. Like that's just what men do. It's guys will be guys, that type of thing. But then when it comes to like talking about it with others, or the shame is like, where's the disconnect there, I guess?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's very normalized in our society. And it's part of that kind of, what we might call toxic masculinity culture, which, jokes about it and that locker room kind of talk. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of men use it as a defense mechanism or a bonding mechanism to talk about it in that way. And it is very hard to have, genuine, vulnerable conversations about, hey, I think this is actually impacting me, or hey, I don't actually feel so great about the things I'm watching, or it's hard to have those spaces. And this is why it's so important to have things like men's groups or support groups. It's one of the things we do in my program, but, many other support groups or men's groups provide that space where you can actually say, this actually it feels like it's impacting me, and I'm not sure if this is healthy for me. And also where you can have men who are older or wiser or whatever, who can call you out and say, hey, I see you're kind of joking about this, but what's behind that joke? Like, why are you joking about this? This actually isn't something that's funny. To be called out in that way is actually really helpful also.
Yeah, I feel like that would catch me so off guard if someone just saw right through my bullshit. I'd be like, oh gosh, okay, let's
Yeah.
get real for a moment.
Yeah. Cause we all do it. I mean, it's not just a men's thing. It's a human thing. And,
Hmm.
I'm sure women have like their own version of things that might be like, that they joke about in an unhealthy or kind of toxic way. And really there's some
Hmm.
deeper pain underneath it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right when you said that, the first thing that came up to me was like eating disorders or body image issues where
Mhm.
you want to look a certain way, but you also don't tell people that, oh, I haven't eaten at all today, or like I was binge eating last night, or just weird relationships with food. So that was the first thing that came to mind when you said that. So that,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would love to talk about kind of like what the road to recovery looks like. Of course, it's going to vary by person, but I think there's a big misconception that, oh, you're addicted to porn, just stop watching it. Or like, oh, you're addicted to porn, just like put up blockers and filters on your internet, you're fine. So could you talk more about kind of like the obstacles of actually overcoming a porn addiction and why it's not just easier said than done?
Yeah. Well, this brings me back to something you and I talked about in Bali, which I know like really you found insightful. Which is, it's like thinking about someone who's struggling with porn addiction is very similar to thinking about somebody who is struggling with cocaine addiction. And just imagine if they
Yes.
always have a bag of cocaine in their pocket and they are not allowed to take that bag of cocaine out of their pocket. It's like wherever they go, they have to travel with cocaine. And that's in some ways how it is for men with porn addiction. It's like their phone, which is a immediate source of acting out, is always on them and with them. And so they're always like
Mhm.
you know, a hand movement away from being able to access it. So it's a very hard thing to beat because it's just so accessible. And this relates to one of the things that's called the 3 A's of porn addiction. There are these 3 things that make porn very addictive. And so it's affordability, accessibility, and anonymity. So the affordability part is, and these are 3 things that like, it can be anything. It could be video games, whatever. You look at these 3 components and you say, okay, the more that we have these things, the more addictive the substance is going to be. So for example, affordability, if you have a drug that costs $10,000 every time you want to take a hit, it's not going to be super addictive, right? Unless you're a
Mhm.
billionaire. But for most people, it's like, it's just not an affordable mechanism of addiction, right? Versus if you
Mhm.
have something that's free, or let's say, it's $1 every time you want to take a hit, the more you can get it to free, the more addictive it's going to be because there's no barrier to actually using it when you want to medicate your pain away, right? So
Mhm.
that's the affordability. The accessibility is just like how easily can you get it? If let's say you have a drug that's free, but it takes 4 weeks to get delivered to your house and you can only, order it like one at a time. And it's like, it's not very accessible. And so it's not likely going to develop into a strong addiction. But again, if you have something that's immediately accessible, you can get it on your browser, on your phone, whenever you want, and you can get unlimited variety. That's going to make it more addictive. And then the last one, anonymity. It's like, if you can use it anonymously, it also contributes to addictiveness. If it's something that you have to be public about, if you're an alcoholic, like, you have to go to a store and buy it. You have to go to a bar and order it. There are ways you can make it more anonymous. You can order your alcohol online and have it delivered to your door, I guess. But the more anonymous you can be, the more that you can hide away and isolate into that addiction. The other thing that helps something become addictive is the variability and the ways that it can be novel. And so, I talk about this also with junk food. If you're addicted to sugar, like if you have a mountain of candy bars sitting in front of you, at some point you're going to just get physically sick, right? You can't really eat more candy bars. You can eat a lot of candy bars, but at some point, like you can't put more in your mouth, right? But with porn, because there's an infinite amount of variety and novelty, every time you find a new video or find a new, whatever, it hits that dopamine button. And so this is why guys can go for 8 hours or 10 hours watching porn
What?
Oh yeah. It can get bad.
Whoa.
You could just sit there all day. I mean, it's same with video games. Video games can keep people hooked. Like when this World of Warcraft thing came about, like people would sit there for 24 hours because they were just so engaged because there was a constant feedback loop of more novelty, a new quest, a new whatever. Same with porn. It's like a new hunt for another video, right?
Whoa.
For most guys, it's not 8 hours. I don't want to give that impression that that's like average. But it's something that you can just, because of the variety that exists. Like back in the day when it was just magazines, right? It was, again, much harder. Like if you had a single magazine, it was much harder to develop a really strong addiction because you couldn't sit there for 8 hours with a single magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point you get bored of the same photo. But now with modern, and this is one of the things I like to get across, is that modern pornography, modern high-speed internet hardcore pornography is uniquely addictive in a way that it has never been in our history as a civilization. Like a porn magazine is a very different thing because it's like, you see a few photos and then it's like, okay, you get kind of bored. It's not going to really suck you into this pit that lasts for, years and years and hours each time you do it. But with high-speed internet porn, something like Pornhub, you can spend hours and hours on there because there's so, I remember this one statistic, something like this, more porn websites on the internet than non-porn websites.
What?
Like I haven't fact checked that.
God.
I remember hearing it once and I believe it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it's shocking that there is just so much porn on the internet, that there's an infinite variety. And so it is one of these things that makes it so addictive. It's accessible, it's affordable, it's anonymous, there's an infinite variety, right? And it taps directly also into something that's very primal for many men, our sexual energy, which is so powerful and beautiful. It taps directly into that need that most men have of feeling, feeling their sexuality is such an important thing. This is also one of the paths to recovery, is learning how to cultivate healthy sexuality. Because there's two extremes. One is you indulge completely in an unhealthy way. The other extreme is you completely repress it and shove it down and suppress and deny it, right? Which is also very unhealthy. And so learning how to actually embrace a healthy sexuality is an important part of recovery because it is a part of being human. It's a beautiful part of being human. So those are some of the reasons why it's very hard to break free from.
Yeah, I'm honestly still shocked about the 8 hour thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be TMI, but are they finishing every time? Like,
No,
or are you just
well,
like watching it how you'd like watch a TV show, I guess?
Yeah,
like,
it's called
or are you pleasuring that
edging.
entire time?
So you might,
Edging?
you might pleasure for, you might finish a couple times. You might go for 1 or 2 hours and then like finish and then have another few hours. But so edging is this process where you are like right on the edge of orgasming, but you don't finish yet. I mean, this is something I experienced when I was in the heat of my addiction is, I was, searching around trying to find the perfect video to finish on. And so, I would be, keeping my erection, just at the point of like being right there, edging, but not actually finishing until I found the quote unquote perfect video. And it was that hunt as like, and this, relates to why it was causing so much suffering and why it was impacting my relationships the way it was is like every video was just not quite perfect. I always wanted something a little bit better. Right. And so this is how you can start to see if you have an addiction is if you have this kind of mentality of, I want something a little bit better, as opposed to you click on the first video you see and you're like, this is good enough. I'll watch this for 10 minutes and then finish and that's okay. Right. That again is like a little bit of a healthier way to approach it. But yeah, for some men, it's just the hunt that's so addictive. Searching for that next video, that next thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then something that came to mind when you were talking about that, because I've had a good amount of girls reach out to me just confused about why erectile dysfunction. They'd be like, oh, and this happened to me in my past relationship where like it was fine. Like performance wasn't an issue, but then all of a sudden it did become an issue. And it became a repetitive issue. And I've heard a lot of girls always think that it was a result because of them, of course. Like, oh, he's not attracted to me, I can't turn him on. So could you talk more about how a porn addiction or porn consumption can lead to erectile dysfunction?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hyperstimulus. It's a supernatural stimulus. And so what's going on is men are getting habituated to this high level of stimulation and they're hardwiring their brain, their neural circuitry to associate super high levels of eroticism and stimulation with arousal. And so then when like a normal, healthy kind of like interaction with your partner, it's like, oh my God, there's no choking and gangbang and, all crazy kind of stuff going on. Well, this isn't doing it for me because it's not crazy enough. It's not stimulating enough because they're used to just such a high. It's like if you get accustomed to eating like Doritos potato chips, like super, some crazy flavor like Nacho Supreme, Cool Ranch Blast, it's like you put that on your tongue and it's like this explosion of flavor, right? And if you eat that every day and you start getting accustomed to that's what food needs to taste like, then if you go have like chicken breast and broccoli with like maybe a little bit of salt, it's like, what? This isn't, I need a Doritos and, bacon cheeseburger and a vanilla milkshake. It's like you're over amplifying and getting these unrealistic expectations of what sex is supposed to look like and feel like. And again, it's not even like that, like you should, as the female, like say, oh, well, I'm just a boiled potato and like plain chicken breast. It's just an unrealistic. It's like, imagine if there was this magical bag of Doritos that every chip you pulled out was a new flavor and it was constantly morphing into a new variety, right? And men are accustomed to this kind of like hyperstimulus that's always evolving and always changing, always wanting something new. Like if you're a guy and you watch the exact same porn video every time, that's a great sign. If you have one porn video and you're just like satisfied with that one porn video, good on you, man. Like you're just like, okay, I'm just horny and I want like, but if you're again looking for something new every time, you're telling your brain that what's going to get you aroused is something novel, something fresh. And that's, again, it's not about you. It's not about your body. It's just like men's brains are hijacked by porn to think that what's going to turn them on is something fresh and new. So that leads to erectile dysfunction because as soon as they don't have that hyperstimulus, their, junk doesn't recognize it. It's like, I'm not aroused by this, right? This isn't stimulating enough. And so then they can't get it up or they can't keep it up. And so this it happens to a lot of men where they have to like close their eyes and picture a porn scene that they recently saw while they're having sex in order to get aroused.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I'm pretty sure it was when I was talking with you about just how the addiction was affecting my relationship. And like when we were talking about intimacy, and I was like, yeah, it always felt like he was in a different room. Like when we were having sex, it felt like he just wasn't there, wasn't present, and always closing his eyes. Then you made the connection, like, yeah, he's probably visualizing porn scenes. And I was like, whoa, I had just never thought of that before. It was such an eye opener. And then it also makes me feel bad for the porn addict because now you can't even enjoy real life sex, which I would say is so much better than having to watch it behind a screen. So like it hurts everyone involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Men become very disconnected from their bodies with porn sex. When they're engaged in porn, it's completely in their head. They're not actually in their body. And this, is an experience that many women of men with porn addiction can relate to. It's like, it doesn't even feel like he's there, right? He's just kind of lost in space in his head somewhere. And it's very different from having an embodied experience of sex and intimacy where you're really present with your partner. You're in your body, you're feeling all your sensations as opposed to just in your imagination thinking of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's just sucks. I hate porn so much just because it's impacted so many relationships and just people as a whole. And I just hate how normalized it has become in society. And like, I'm not shaming people who watch it, like not at all, but just, I hate that we even have to be having this conversation that porn was created to be the way that it is, where it's so intense and extreme and so addictive, where it's like, I wish you could just go back in time to the magazines and not just be that, or just having intimacy with your partner. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah. And, this is something that we talked about also when we had our conversation in Bali, is that I think many men who are struggling with porn addiction feel the same. It's like they wish porn wasn't a thing also. It's like,
Wow. Yeah.
this is when it's an addiction. It's like when you can't help yourself and you wish it didn't even exist, but it's just this thing you feel almost compelled, almost powerless against, that you just like, I just wish this wasn't even a thing. I wish I wasn't doing this. I wish I wasn't addicted. And you can tell yourself that all day, all day, all day. And then nighttime comes and you find yourself there again, like just drawn to it. And I think it does bring a lot of compassion. It's not a shaming thing. It's these poor guys that, are getting sucked into this trap, which it's a trap. There's a huge industry behind it. There's a lot of money in the porn industry and it makes money for a lot of people. And there's a reason why it's so addictive. So to have compassion for the people who are getting sucked into that.
Yeah. Doesn't the porn industry make more money than like the NFL, NBA, and what's the other one? Sport. I'm not a sports girl. I don't know.
I think all the major sports leagues combined, apparently.
Yeah, that is. Oh, it's so interesting when you think of it as an industry, because they're making so much money, and just the amount of like traffic they even get to their sites, isn't it more than like Amazon, Netflix, and all the big sites combined? It's just like,
yeah,
it's a monster, an absolute monster. But not shaming people who watch it, just the industry in and of itself. But I do want to be cautious of time. Is there anything before we hop off that you'd like to say, or anything that we didn't get to?
I think one of the things we briefly touched on this, but just understanding what addiction really is, and that it's an attempt to numb a sense of pain. It's an escape, and that if men want to break free from this thing, they really have to understand the underlying dynamics of the addiction. I see a lot of men trying to just quit and use willpower and, try harder, but they're not actually addressing the underlying reason of why they have this addiction. of the constant running away from pain and chasing pleasure, if you don't address that underlying issue, then you're not really going to make any meaningful changes. You might be able to stop for a few weeks or even a couple months using willpower, but inevitably something's going to come back, because if you don't develop the tools and the resources, the emotional intelligence to actually be with difficult emotions, then as soon as a strong, difficult emotion comes back, you're going to reach out to some addiction. It might be porn, it might be something else. And so a lot of the work that we need to do is learning how to be with unpleasant emotions, learning how to be with anxiety, learning how to be with loneliness, learning how to be with insecurity, whatever it is. Like, you have to learn how to actually work with those things. So that, I think, is just such an important thing for people to understand.
Yeah. And that's where one of the meditation tools can come in. It's so helpful just to get you to be aware of your emotions and thoughts, and to let you know that you are not your emotions and thoughts. But so yeah, I think it's so cool how meditation was one of the things that helped you work through your addiction. That it just speaks volumes of how powerful meditation really is.
Yeah. And that, just one other thing to mention is, when we were talking earlier about some of the problems that I was noticing, like what porn was causing in my life, in some ways, the biggest thing, the overarching theme of the problems it was causing in my life was just how much suffering it was causing for my life. That I started to realize that when there's something that you want that you don't have, that is suffering. When you're craving something that you don't have, and you want this thing, you don't have it, that is what suffering is. And similarly, when there's something you do have, some emotion, some experience, and you don't want it, and you're trying to push it away, that's also suffering. And I realized that porn was directly leading to both of those things, just this immense suffering in my life of constantly wanting what I don't have and not wanting what I do have. And this is what meditation, particularly mindfulness meditation, helps us deal with, is it helps us learn how to stop just chasing things that we don't have, how to be actually content and grateful and appreciative of what we have in the moment, and also how to stop running away from unpleasant things. When there's some pain in your body, you can just say, oh, this is unpleasant, but I don't need to suffer. I don't need to run away from it. Similarly, like a painful emotion, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, whatever, you can actually be with it instead of this constant running away from it. And that is the power of meditation. It's why meditation for me is one of the most important things you can do in your recovery. I mean, letting go of shame, being in a safe community, but also learning how to work with your mind is such an important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so important. And I'd even say meditation is one of the most important things for me, like healing during the betrayal trauma too, because it's just an overwhelm and just such strong emotions, and your mind just becomes, it's such an inner critic, and you're literally like emotionally abusing yourself with all the bad thoughts you have about yourself. And I did a 5-day silent retreat in Bali, which was like probably 4 months after the betrayal. And that was a dark time, just like sitting in silence with my thoughts. But I also think that was also one of the most healing moments of looking back at my whole healing journey, because to just sit down with your thoughts and to know that you don't have to like act out on them. You can just sit with them, and it's not, you aren't your thoughts. You're not your emotions. And yeah, it's just so powerful. So yeah, I could go on and on about meditation. It's changed like every aspect of my life. I can't go a day without it. Like I can literally notice a day if I don't meditate in the morning. Like I just feel so much more like antsy or irritated throughout the day, or like I'm so in my head instead of just being in my body. It's wild.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. If anyone's listening and they want to get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah. So you could go to unhookedacademy.com if you want to learn more about the men's group, the support group in the Unhooked Academy program. So that's unhookedacademy.com. You can also just go to my website, jeremylipkowitz.com, and then you can sign up for a free discovery call on either of those sites if you're interested in coaching or in the group program.
Amazing. I will link all of that in the show notes. So yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. This was amazing. I'm so happy you went on your healing journey and overcame this and now get to help others because you're making such an impact in the world. So thank you.
My pleasure.